households across the country are waking up, facing the prospect of being more than £1,000 a year worse off as the universal credit uplift comes to an end.
The government says it was only ever meant to be a temporary measure to help people through the pandemic, but as households face higher living costs, there's real concern things will get worse, not better, for millions this winter. We spoke to one family who are feeling the effect. Here's Ciara Durkin.
Joanne's young family are barely managing. Her partner Marshall lost his job a week before lockdown and wasn't eligible for furlough, forcing the couple to live on Joanne's £140 a week maternity pay.
On top of being new parents, like obviously that's a whole world of emotions in itself, and then having no money and then being stuck in the house, and it's literally everything, just emotionally and financially.
With very little money coming in, the pair were faced with a choice between eating and paying their household bills.
We literally cut back as much as we could. It was coming between like food, gas, electric. Obviously them prices are all gone dead sky high now as well.
Unable to pay rent, and after the maternity pay stopped, their debts soon racked up. Universal credit became a lifeline.
The inflation of everything, the cost of actual living, I feel like that money should just be standard anyway. That's literally, it's surviving money. It's literally, it's your fuel. Do you know what I mean? Or like food. It's needed, to be honest.
Marshall is now back working, but the family is still in debt, owing £4,000 in rent and facing an uncertain future ahead.
Now, we're joined to discuss this by former Health Minister Edwina Currie, who believes the focus needs to be getting people back into work. And I want to thank Edwina for being there, because we tried to get Tory MPs to come on and debate with our guests, but none would do so. And could that be because they're scared of Red Nev? Former England footballer Gary Neville, who says he's ashamed to live in a country where people are having to choose between eating and heating. Now, Gary, you're up in Manchester where the Tory conference is, and Boris Johnson is going to be saying today that he's levelling up the country. And I just wonder how that feels up there where you are now on the day that millions of families are losing £1,000 a year.
Well, I think the fact that the government and successive governments have felt the need to actually give us a slogan in the north of England. Cameron and Osborne's one was a little more sexier. It was called the Northern Powerhouse, and we were wooed for a little bit because it sounded quite nice, and we all sort of started using it. The Johnson one, levelling up, is a lot more basic. I mean, the reality of it is that I think the game's up for them in respect of thinking that they're addressing the issues. They're not addressing the issues in the north. They don't even particularly care, I don't think, about the issues in the north of England. What it really does tell us is that they've got probably expensive brand and communications agencies who come up with a slogan and work out how we can pacify us for the next few years and give us a sort of slogan like levelling up. I mean, we're in Manchester city centre. Homelessness, I think, is sort of times by 6 in the last 10 years with the Conservatives in power. There are 400 temporary homeless households in 2010. There's 2,500 now. Transport spend per head in London is £900. Here it's £376 in the north of England. So he can go on stage this afternoon and talk about levelling up if he wants, but the reality of it is that we won't buy it. It's not happening. And I suppose it's like a parent at home having to try and convince one of their two children that you're going to treat them as well as the sort of other. You don't really have to do it if you're doing a good job. He needs an investment plan and a strategy for the north of England. He hasn't got one. And the fact that he's in Manchester speaking this afternoon, I'd probably urge him not to use that phrase, because I think it's quite derogatory and insulting to the people of the north of England. That's not just people in Manchester, it's Leeds, Liverpool, Newcastle. It doesn't really mean a lot to us.
Edwina Currie, how is it levelling up when you're removing more than £1,000 a year from those who are already on the lowest incomes?
Well, good morning from the Peak District. I'm about 20 miles from Manchester, and I can tell you that where I live is doing very well indeed. And what we have to realise is that we've got something like 1 million vacancies being advertised in the country. We have record numbers of vacancies. We have whole industries desperate for more people to come into work, from catering, in the care industry, in food processing. Businesses are absolutely desperate and pushing up wages. So it doesn't make any kind of sense for us to pay people to stay home. Okay. What we really want is for people to get out there and get the jobs, or if they're working.
Edwina Currie, not everybody on universal credit doesn't have a job. 40% of those on universal credit are already in work.
Yeah, but the majority of people on universal credit don't have a job. And that's where we can start. And we're talking about a very large numbers of people. One of the things the government is doing is helping those people, actually putting more money into supporting and tutoring and mentoring people to get back into work, sometimes to get a job for the first time. That can be difficult. We recognise that. Sometimes to make better choices about how they live and how they spend their money. There's a whole host of opportunities. There's 30 million people out there in the country who are listening to me as I say, the best benefit is a job. And that's very important. And it's wrong for us to be paying people to stay home when the economy needs people. Just a minute. When the economy actually needs people to get into work, and we need people to get into better jobs, and we need to push employers to pay them better and to look after their workforce better.
Gary, you're an employer. What do you think hearing that?
Well, let me just translate what Edwina's said for people up and down the country, because it's a message that Conservative MPs have been entrenching in our minds for a long time. The first thing that Edwina said was that I'm OK here and we're OK here, which is the first thing that a Conservative person does and a Conservative MP. They look after themselves. The next thing that she said was, you know, go and get a job. Get back to work, you lazy sods. Get off your backside. Stop watching Good Morning Britain and other television programmes and go and get a job. That's what she said. It's the way in which this sort of language sort of appeared. It's the way in which this sort of language appears from sort of Conservative ministers for so long. You know, immigrants are all taking our jobs. Homeless people are all beggars on the streets. You know, they're basically alienated people. You know, you think people... I trust the population of this country. I work on the theory that people at home aren't sitting there lazy. They really want a good job. They really want to get good pay. They really want the mental health to be sorted. And they're not there sitting and thinking, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the sort of the Chancellor's money and live off nothing, you know, live off their money for the next sort of 10, 15 years and do nothing. So, to me, the language is always divisive. It's not helpful. It's something that, to be fair, we've seen now over 10 years and, to be fair, previous Tory governments. It's really dangerous. We're one team in this country. We're one group of people. Honestly, to remove universal credit payments at this moment in time is brutal.
OK, Edwina
Let's be
Currie,
clear. It is brutal.
Edwina Currie, here's a couple of examples, because you said that those people who are facing this cut should go and get themselves a job.
Because
I want to put some of the viewers' points to you. Keeley says, I work full-time. My husband lost his job through COVID. Universal credit helps us massively while he is struggling to find work. I've never claimed benefits before, so I didn't know any different with the amount. To lose £86 a month, that's my electric bill, or 1 week's shopping. Claire, I'm a frontline worker on universal credit, as my partner had a stroke, already run out of money on the Uplift, and organising a food bank so that we can eat next week. Victoria, I'm a full-time carer for my disabled mother. My carer's allowance gets deducted from universal credit. My husband's unable to work due to mental illness.
It's brutal, Edwina. He's right. It's brutal.
Young children, they already use food banks. These are people who are either working or are doing exactly what Sajid Javid said yesterday, looking after members of their family.
Yeah. I can judge, if I may, on Gary, and I'm hoping that the next job he gets is to stand for Parliament, because he'd actually make a very good politician. I don't know how good he is as a footballer. Look, there will be some people for whom this is not going to be helpful, absolutely, and particularly where there is disability in the family. But there are millions of others who, because of COVID, have been faced with very difficult times, and that we are now putting behind us. And it's really important that we all do what we can to help the country as we help ourselves, as we help our families, as we help our communities. There are jobs out there, and there are better jobs out there. If you don't feel you're being paid enough, talk to your employer. If you feel that perhaps that job's not going anywhere, look at getting yourself better trained, look at getting yourself into a better job. There's plenty of work out there, particularly as we come up to Christmas.
OK, Edwina.
Particularly as we come up to Christmas.
All right,
Edwina.
Gary, just before you came in, first of all, let me tell Edwina, he wasn't even the best footballer in his own household. So, you know, we can park how good a footballer he was. He wasn't bad, Edwina. He wasn't bad. Gary, final question to you, if I may. You have worked with a man who is recognised as probably the greatest leader that was ever a football manager in this country, and you know a bit about leadership yourself. Give us your analysis, and I've seen some of the stuff you said on Twitter, and it's pretty eye-watering. Give some of your analysis of the difference in leadership styles between that guy that you work for, Sir Alex Ferguson, and the guy who's running the country right now.
Alistair, can I do a deal with Edwina, please? We've got winter coming up, soaring fuel prices, energy prices, food prices, that we just put off the universal credit cut till March, spring next year, allow people to retrain, is what she's just said. Let's give them the time. Let's not create a cliff edge in families' lives. Can we do a deal, Edwina, that will put the universal credit back, the actual cut back to March next year? Because that would seem a sensible approach, rather than doing it just before winter kicks in.
But Christmas is coming.
Christmas. Okay,
there are thousands and thousands of jobs. There are thousands and thousands of jobs associated with Christmas. Even in Manchester, in the hospitality industry, there are loads and loads of entry-level jobs that are going begging, with businesses looking for people to come and work. Why don't you go and recruit those people and help them and make sure that they have the money that they can earn? There's nothing better than knowing that you've earned the money to put the food on the table. That's the very best thing that anybody can do.
All right, Edwina.
Edwina, you can't be a chef in 10 minutes, by the way. It takes months to... We need lots of people in our kitchens, as restaurants do up and down the country.
No, but you can be a kitchen porter in 10 minutes.
At least get...
You can...
excuse me.
At least... No, but you can be a kitchen porter in 10 minutes.
It's a scandal. Honestly, for you to say that someone should just go and be a kitchen porter, honestly, it's ridiculous. But anyway, back to Boris Johnson. I mean, look, Boris Johnson, to be fair, it's a little bit... Boris Johnson, to be honest with you, you go and be a kitchen porter. You know, do a job. You wouldn't do it yourself, so why would you ask someone else to do it? Anyway, back to Boris Johnson. Look, Boris Johnson, to me, isn't good enough, really, to be the Prime Minister of this country, if I'm being basic. I think that... You know, he's a bit of a spaghetti bolognese of a man. He looks scruffy. Each of his sentences and his speeches are almost like a strand of spaghetti. You have no idea where it starts, and you've certainly no idea where it ends. And yet... he's popular. And if you look at a menu and you've sort of got a waiter or a waitress over your shoulder asking you to make a choice, and there's nothing, you have to make a panicky decision, and your choices are really poor, you end up going for your spaghetti bolognese. And we need really good alternatives to the spaghetti bolognese.
OK,
we really do, because honestly, it is not good enough at this moment in time.
Boris Johnson is a spaghetti bolognese. You should be a politician, and Edwina's going to be a kitchen porter. Thank you, both of us.
Kitchen porter.
Thank you.
Thank you, both of us.
Get her in my hotel this afternoon. She can come this afternoon.
Yeah, do a shift, Edwina. Get a job.